What is the mission of the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at the Aerospace Corporation? And how does it use innovative approaches such as strategic foresight and futures thinking to meet its mission? I'll explore these questions and so much more with our very special guest, Kara Cunzeman, lead for strategic foresight at the Aerospace Corporation's Center for Space Policy and Strategy. I would like to talk about the center you are part of within the Aerospace Corporation, and that's the Center for Space Policy and Strategy. What does it mean to be a federally funded research and development center? And maybe you could tell us more about your center's mission.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I run strategic foresighting in the Center for Space Policy and Strategy, which is kind of a edge part of our organization that is specifically focused on, trying to leverage this vast breadth of technical expertise that the broader Aerospace Corporation kind of brings to the table and really inform, timely and independent insight and analysis to help formulate effective space policy and national security policy. So we are kind of in this really interesting place where we're able to bridge and bring together players across the enterprise and really kind of move some conversations forward. I think with an end goal of hopefully having, more proactive, anticipatory type of policy making.
That's great. What about your role? What is the responsibilities and duties of a lead futurist for strategic foresight within the center? And more importantly, how does your role within the center really help inform the mission of the Aerospace Corporation?
Yeah, you mean what is it like to be a space futurist, right?
That's right. It's great. It sounds like a wonderful job.
Oh my gosh,
really.
I think I definitely have one of the best jobs in the world for sure. So my job really is to lead this amazing team of experts and critical thinkers, and really I call them the A team, because we're at Aerospace, but they really are. I mean, they're the brightest minds who help us think about systematic approaches of really weighing possible futures, given that we are in an era of uncertainty and complexity. And how do we help empower decision makers to shape towards more aspirational futures today? So, the goal of the work that I lead, it's not to predict the future by any means of the imagination. Nobody can do that, and if they say they can, definitely run the other way because they can't. This is more really about adequately challenging our assumptions, building better visions for where we want to go, more intently focusing on actions in the present so that we get there, rather than just kind of, going along with the flow or reacting, to the kind of like here and now, because we could be missing some bigger opportunities. So I think that part is maybe the most interesting part of my job, is that, we're really change makers, right? We're seeding transformation. We're challenging the status quo. We're looking for better ways to do things.
Kara, what is strategic foresight? Can you help us understand how the discipline of strategic foresight can inform and develop long-term strategic planning, visioning? And again, this is a multi-layered question, but to what extent, and I think you hinted at this earlier, to what extent is it not about predicting the future and more about anticipating aspects of uncertainty and testing those assumptions?
Yeah, well, it's really funny. I feel like the word foresight is actually very intimidating. I can't figure out why. But I mean, it's honestly, like, if you take one thing away from our conversation, right, it's just a fancy term for making better decisions under uncertainty. That's all it is. It's really quite simple. In practice, right, it's the application of systematic tools and methods to help identify emerging shifts and implications, and then translate those actions to help field better future outcomes. So, and when I say tools, I mean, for those, again, that are in the scientific community, it may not necessarily mean a large calculator, but it's usually like, mind maps and different types of ways which you can facilitate, groups of people to think deeply about the future and then harness those insights to drive, actionable outcomes. So it really is just, I think, a nice complement to help enhance and improve strategy and visioning, as we are in what we call a VUCA world, that's a military term, but it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so we live in this environment, which is highly connected, digitized and elsewhere. And I think the pandemic really highlighted just how highly connected we are. So it's time to upgrade the operating system for which we employ our strategies, for which we employ our decision making. And I think foresighting really is that foundation to help us get to a place where we can navigate this critical uncertainty.
So I know we kind of chatted about this before we started the conversation, but I was wondering if you could tell me more about your work around the PathFinder's Guide to Space Enterprise and highlight some of the efforts and core themes in this. And maybe your Foresight team, how do they go about getting this guide and this map together?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It seems like forever ago. It was just 3 years ago. This was so much fun to make. So our team really wanted to create a product that speaks to not just, where government space is going or the commercial sector, but really holistically, what are the possibilities of the future space enterprise? And how do we start getting a more collective discussion around those possibilities to highlight, critical either policy advancements that need to happen or investments, or thinking about, what kinds of strategies would be better for us as a nation or as, humankind than others, right? So big picture. And we wanted to do something that was immersive and visual. So there's a couple parts of that, right? One is, how do you use the practice of foresighting to actually get the content? And then the other is, how do you display that content in a meaningful way to a wide variety of audience, some of which may not have background on space. So it was very challenging, actually. So we, put together different set of tools and employed them in various workshops. We had over 70 participants within aerospace, as well as a lot of great contributors external to aerospace to help us think through, what are the trends? What are the emerging disruptors? What are the potential interesting future scenarios that we should consider as we're putting this together? And we kind of, from that, we did several series of these, right? So we spent about 6 months just having roundtables and workshops and, thinking about where the future could go. And then we started to distill common themes and common messages. And, I can walk through those here in a second. But I also think that it was a really important piece that made this a success. We had our media team and artists sit with us from day one to listen to the conversation. And so they were there with us hand in hand, working on different models of communication. So we had probably 7 or 8 different ways we wanted to frame this up. And then we ended up landing on what was kind of a cheeky, printed out Hitchhiker's, guide, a little nod to the Hitchhiker's Guide, right? Pamphlet. And then of course, we went on to create a more immersive version that digital, that we coded in Unity because we wanted a digital, a more digitally digestible product because the pandemic happened and then we weren't going to conferences and handing these out. Our initial thinking was somebody would physically take this pamphlet and put it up on their office wall and look at it every day and get different ideas. And then, kind of the next phase of that was how do we make this accessible digitally and more digestible? So then we had it more like a navigation space, and we have embedded videos with experts around the world talking about what they think the future is going to look like. And maybe my proudest piece of it is we actually asked the future about what they thought the future is going to look like. So we got lots of K through 12 and early career and college students to also weigh in on that. So I think, we can certainly put the link in and have people go dive into that. But I would say the two kind of important critical uncertainties identified across all of that, we're really looking at the degree in which space is going to be quote unquote commercialized, right? So the degree in which space and the economic value and ecosystem that would be built could stand on its own feet. And then another critical uncertainty was really looking at the evolution and potential transformation of global power states. And you can interpret that in a variety of ways, right? You can interpret that in, how does great power competition and nation state, competition pan out? But also there's a lot of other nuances and dynamics that are emerging in terms of, as the world becomes more digitized and, as, common interests kind of surface above where you are geographically, but also how governance pans out as we look towards off-world living and what that could look like. So those were the two kind of like really important critical uncertainties. And then I think these are the most fascinating pieces out of all of this, which rises above space, which is we are literally on the precipice of, I think, redefining or having to clarify what does it mean to be human, given the changing landscape in general and super artificial intelligence, given the advancements in biotechnology and genetic modification and our role in the universe. And so I think this is really important as we step back and think about futures. And then also, what is the role and critical kind of jewels of space that we haven't really thought of yet that we could take back home and take with us wherever we go in the universe? So things like what new value could come out of a booming space economy, what kinds of, national advantage and prestige from the activities we have. How could space help us solve some of our hardest problems back on Earth and with humanity, like climate change? There's definitely some interesting, I think, roles in which space can help us get to a better place on Earth and help heal, some of the damage that we've done. So these were kind of the two kind of critical, big, deep aha moments that we had from this work. And certainly encourage folks if they like visuals, to go look it up afterwards. But I think it's important to kind of share like a lot of effort and activity goes into making these seemingly simplistic but very deep insights. They don't just happen overnight. It takes a whole army of really smart people to kind of hone that in, to get to an endpoint like that.
I want to switch gears a bit to the Space Agenda 2021 report. And in that report, which I think the Aerospace Corporation puts out, it raised a number of key issues and decision points for policymakers to consider. I was wondering if you could highlight your contribution, the Foresight contribution to this, and some of the key issues and decision points.
Yeah. So, just as you point out, I think we try to publish what we call the Space Agenda report every time a new administration comes in, just to give them kind of like a quick, here are the key issues in policy. And it was interesting for me because they brought us in, after this respective individual chapters were written and said, what do you think of this? And so I looked at this and I was like, you know what, this is a great opportunity for us to just, call it as it is it's pretty clear we're at the precipice of some major changes in the space enterprise. And this lack of kind of a collective vision for where we want to go nationally is really actually a huge detriment to the future kind of opportunities for space. So, for example, we hear a lot of like frequent narratives on like, why are we spending so much money on space? Or it's only the billionaires that are determining where we get to go. And we have so much here to kind of fix at home. And, the truth is like there is this whole other narrative that a lot of folks don't see, which is the current value that space provides to society, but also the potential new value that it could provide in solving Earth's problems. Things like food insecurity and understanding our climate and healing it and democratizing access to the internet and reducing scarcity of limited resources here on Earth and creating unlimited green and clean power. Like the list goes on and on and on, right? So here I was, thinking about like, well, how do we tie this all together? And I mean, they brought me in because it's like, well, of course, strategic foresighting can be that operating system to help us, right, start to achieve a little bit more clarity on where we want to go and align all these kind of disparate pieces. And more importantly, lay into a roadmap, what are the most urgent things that we really need to take care of now, which I think we'll probably have a discussion about that one here in a second. And what are things that we have to start seeding because we know they're coming down the line and we know that it's going to take some really hard work to get there. But more importantly, what are the frameworks and systems that we're going to put in place so that we can start to adapt and respond to obstacles on the road as we go, right? That's more important than fixating on a single thing. It's the operating system that's most important to get right. And so anyways, that's kind of what, the roll-up chapter was all about, was like, I think there were something like 21 different space policy issues that need to get addressed, and they're all equally important. And the question back is, where are we trying to go? If we don't know where we're trying to go, how do you vector check, how to lay those all into a bigger plan?
So now I'd like to talk about a project of yours that you're moving forward on currently, and that is the Project North Star. What is it? What prompted its creation? And what are some of the core goals, and how does it hope to achieve those goals?
Yeah. So I think you guys are already starting to see some of the themes that have popped up from our space-based research. But yeah, we are just embarking on a project called North Star, which I guess has a cheeky name since I do have space background. But it really is all about trying to illuminate a set of aspirational futures for the nation over the next, 50 to 100 years, even beyond that can really help serve as like this core universal foundation or tenets that help us withstand the test of things like the things that are getting in the way of progress, like political terms, infighting, propelling a longer set of enduring goals for the nation. So really trying to figure out, where are we going collectively as a nation? Because we don't have that right now. And then outlining a potential set of grand strategies. And, I think in the context of this, we're not grand strategy is not just a military context. We're thinking a completely, comprehensive, domestic, international, like, again, all fielding and helping us wield our efforts towards where we want to go. And considering that there is a pretty highly uncertain set of future states ahead of us, some that we can imagine and some that we need to push ourselves to imagine a little bit further, and drive those into the types of collective investments, resources, and urgent decision-making that need to happen. Again, hoping to bridge the divide from what we've seen get worse and worse over time, on the political spectrum. There are things that unite us, and there are things that need to get done to see transformation. And we have no mechanisms right now to actually do that well. So our project really is, trying to help illuminate what those possible North Stars could be, what the future states we need to consider, what possible resilient strategies are for the nation, and then just highlight that work. We're not expecting to come out of this study with the perfect answer. There is no perfect answer, but we're trying to build a broader, more collective perspective on where we want to go.
This has been the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Kara Cunzeman, leader for strategic foresight at the Center for Space Policy and Strategy at the Aerospace Corporation. Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government leadership and its effectiveness. Until then, subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always, at businessofgovernment.org.